Welcome to the Curious Case. I'm Davis. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And how has your day been so far? I always enjoy hearing from you. Share a little note in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for a new cozy mystery every evening. Settle in, relax, and let the kettle warm beside you. Tonight, something small in the village goes strangely wrong. The frost hadn't melted yet, but the hall doors were open. Miss Marple stood just beyond the entrance, hands folded, eyes steady. She watched the villagers arrive. The first was Mr. Leonard Pike, retired schoolmaster, carrying a jar of homemade marmalade. Next came Mrs. Gilda Trent, hat too large, scarf even larger. She waved at Miss Marple, then tripped on the stairs. "Morning," she called out. "Hope I haven't squashed the jam tarts." Miss Marple smiled gently. She had not brought any jam tarts. Reverend Charles Bell came last, breathless, wearing his cassock under a wool coat. He looked around nervously. "The tables still aren't labelled," he muttered. "They were supposed to be labelled." Miss Marple didn't respond. Inside, the village baking competition was almost ready. A large samovar stood steaming on the far table. Several platters were already covered in tea towels, but not all the entries had arrived. Miss Marple walked slowly along the trestle tables. She paused at one that was already set. 12 muffins, uniform, golden brown, orange zest curled carefully on each. Her eyes moved to the label. "Cranberry orange muffins, Mrs. Clarice Dalton." That name meant something. A 3-year winner, known for her precision. Miss Marple kept walking. A young man stood near the back, his table empty. He held a paper in one hand, a cloth-covered tin in the other. She didn't know him. "New?" The Reverend approached again. "Miss Marple," he said. "I believe Mrs. Dalton's muffins are already warming." She nodded. "He's new," she replied softly. The Reverend followed her gaze. "Ah, yes, that's her nephew, Mr. Jeremy Dalton. First year." Miss Marple watched him open the tin. He was careful, very careful. Too careful. He placed his muffins slowly. Each one mirrored the others. Same height, same color, same zest curl. He looked at his aunt's table, just once, then looked away fast. Miss Marple turned back to the entrance. Mrs. Dalton had arrived, apron still folded in her arms, brooch at her collar, eyes sharp. "Jeremy," she called. "You started without me?" He stepped back. "Just setting them out." "Where's the card?" she asked. He handed it to her quickly. Miss Marple moved to the far wall. She sat on a folding chair. From there she could see every table, every face. The air smelled like vanilla and nerves. Mrs. Trent was fussing with a basket. She kept peeking at Jeremy's muffins, then at Mrs. Dalton's. Mr. Pike had left his marmalade and was hovering by the tea table. He sipped, then checked his watch. The Reverend clapped his hands. 5 minutes, please. Then judging begins. Miss Marple didn't move. Jeremy wiped his hands on a napkin, but his fingers still trembled. He dropped the napkin, didn't pick it up. Mrs. Dalton looked annoyed. Miss Marple watched her walk toward him. She whispered something. He nodded, then turned away. Miss Marple leaned back in her chair. Her tea had gone cold, but she hadn't touched it. Too much movement, too many glances. Not everyone was here to win. Some were here to prove something else, and at least one person was hiding something. But one face looked different today. The hall filled quickly. Voices rose. Chairs shifted. Cups clinked. The village bake-off had officially begun. Miss Marple took a seat near the back. She liked that position. Quiet, unnoticed, perfect for watching. Mr. Leonard Pike was the first to start the chatter. 3 years in a row, he said loudly. Mrs. Dalton won't let anyone touch that silver cup again. Mrs. Gilda Trent tightened her scarf. She wins because she measures every crumb, she said. Not because she bakes with heart. Mr. Pike laughed. That's jealousy talking. It isn't, Mrs. Trent snapped. It's reality. Rivalry established. Miss Marple noted the tone. Hard. Sharp. Old. The Reverend stepped up to the head table. Clipboard ready. Pen prepared. "We'll begin soon," he called. But no one listened. The tension had its own rhythm now. Miss Marple observed Jeremy Dalton again. He stood behind his table. Still nervous. Still glancing at his aunt. Then back at his own muffins. Then away again. He pushed one muffin half an inch forward. Then pulled it back. Then rearranged the entire row. Too much movement. Too much fear. Mrs. Dalton noticed. She approached him, whispered sharply, held his wrist. He froze. Miss Marple narrowed her eyes. The grip was firm, almost a warning, not guidance. Across the room, Mrs. Trent muttered, "He didn't bake those." Mr. Pike raised a brow. "Who else would?" "Mrs." Trent didn't answer. Miss Marple heard all of it. The Reverend moved table to table, checking labels, straightening cloths, trying to look calm. He wasn't. Miss Marple spotted a small detail behind him. A smear on a table leg. Pale. Sticky. Not from tea. Not from jam. Butter. She filed it away. A young girl entered then, about 12, carrying a small notebook. She waved at Jeremy. He waved back. Too fast. Too eager. Mrs. Dalton didn't like it. Her eyes narrowed. Her posture stiffened. Miss Marple watched that too. Control. Always control. A plate dropped on the far table. Not hard, just enough noise to stall the chatter. Mr. Ben Hollow stood there. He looked embarrassed. His cookies had slid sideways. "Too much excitement," he mumbled. Mrs. Trent smirked. "Or too little skill." Ben flushed. Jeremy looked down. Mrs. Dalton folded her arms. Miss Marple kept studying faces. The real clues were never on the tables, always on the people. The Reverend called for silence. "Please gather around for the opening remarks." Mr. Pike hurried forward. Mrs. Trent walked slower. Ben followed, still flustered. Jeremy stood still until his aunt nudged him. Miss Marple didn't move yet. She watched the group form. Small circle. Forced smiles. Hidden tension. Mrs. Dalton stood tall. Owns the room. Owns the tradition. But Jeremy looked smaller every second. The Reverend cleared his throat. "We celebrate the spirit of friendly competition," he said. "Mrs." Trent muttered. "Some friendlier than others." Mrs. Dalton heard. She didn't turn, but her jaw tightened. Miss Marple noted it again. Jaw. Knuckles. Shoulders. Details most people miss. The Reverend continued. "Rules. Timelines. Judging order." But the villagers weren't listening anymore. Eyes drifted. Toward tables. Toward rivals. Toward Jeremy. A cold silence fell for a moment. Short. Sharp. Real. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. Something in that silence didn't belong. Something small. Something off. Something someone tried to hide. Something wasn't quite right. And Miss Marple felt it instantly. The Reverend had barely finished his sentence. Then it happened. A sharp gasp cut through the hall. Not loud, but enough to freeze every hand. Miss Marple turned first. A tray slipped from Ben Hollow's grip. It hit the table edge, tilted, clattered. 3 cookies rolled off. Ben stepped back fast, too fast. He almost knocked into Mrs. Trent. Sorry, my fault," he said. But his voice shook. Mrs. Trent frowned. "You dropped them because you weren't paying attention." Ben didn't answer. His eyes were on the doorway. Miss Marple followed his gaze. Someone rushed in. Breathless. Red-faced. Hands. Shaking. Mrs. Lydia Hartford. Late as always. But this time, different. She clutched a cloth-covered tin to her chest. Held it tight. Too tight. The Reverend stepped toward her. "Mrs. Hartford, you're nearly 30 minutes behind." But she brushed right past him. Didn't apologize. Didn't greet anyone. Went straight to the far corner table. Miss Marple watched her movements. Fast. Jerky. Uneven. She placed the tin down, but didn't remove the cloth. She kept glancing at the door she'd just entered through, as if expecting someone to follow her. Mr. Pike noticed too. He leaned toward Miss Marple. "She's in a state," he whispered. Miss Marple nodded once. Mrs. Hartford finally looked up, eyes wide, breathing heavy. "Sorry," she said, to no one in particular. "I lost track of time." No one believed her. Mrs. Dalton pursed her lips. Mrs. Trent crossed her arms. Jeremy stared openly. Miss Marple kept watching the tin. Mrs. Hartford placed a hand on it. Flat, firm, protective, too protective. The Reverend tried again. "Well, if your entry is ready, we can still include." "It's ready," she said quickly. "Completely ready." Her voice cracked on the last word. Miss Marple caught it. Everyone else missed it. Ben bent down to retrieve his fallen cookies. He picked one up, then froze. He looked under the table, then around the leg. "Strange," he murmured. Miss Marple heard him. She walked closer. Slow, silent. Ben pointed. "There was something sticky here a moment ago, now it's smudged." Miss Marple crouched slightly. Just enough to see. A thin smear. Pale. Soft. Spread by a shoe. Not icing. Not jam. Butter again. The same she'd seen earlier. Near the other table. Near the table, Jeremy kept reorganizing. She straightened. 2 smears. 2 locations. 2 people. Or one person moving too quickly? Mrs. Hartford shifted her weight, her hand still on the tin, her eyes still, darting. Miss Marple stepped toward her. "Is everything quite all right?" she asked softly. Mrs. Hartford forced a smile. "Yes, perfectly fine." It wasn't. Her voice trembled. Her fingers trembled. Even the cloth over her tin seemed pulled too tight. Miss Marple watched the tension spread across the room, eyes looking, hands fidgeting, breaths uneven. The Reverend tried once more to call order. "Everyone, please." But the mood had already changed. Something small had shifted. Not enough for panic, but enough for fear. Miss Marple felt it in the silence that followed. A silence that didn't belong here. A silence that carried a message, a quiet warning before the real trouble. The hall shifted again. Not a noise this time, a feeling, a pull, a sudden tension across the room. Mrs. Dalton reached her table first. She froze. Her hands lifted slightly, then dropped. Her tray was empty. The 12 muffins gone. She stared at the blank cloth, jaw tight, eyes widening. "Where are they?" she whispered. No one answered. Mrs. Trent stepped closer, her voice sharp. "They were here 5 minutes ago." Mr. Pike leaned forward. "I saw them, all lined up." Jeremy swallowed hard. "You're sure they're missing?" Mrs. Dalton shot him a look. "Of course they're missing. They didn't walk away." Her voice cracked on the last word. Panic rose fast. Not loud panic, quiet panic. The dangerous kind. Villagers rushed to the table, every face tense, every step uncertain. The Reverend held up his hands. "Please everyone stay calm." No one listened. Ben looked under the table. Nothing. Mrs. Trent checked the chairs. Nothing. Jeremy stepped back. Too far back. Miss Marple saw it. Every movement of his. Every tremble. But she didn't speak. Not yet. Mrs. Dalton's breath quickened. Her eyes darted across the room. She pointed to Mrs. Hartford's covered tin. "You came in last," she said. "Did you see anything?" Mrs. Hartford shook her head. Too quickly. Her hand still on her tin. Still protecting it. "No," she said. I didn't look at anyone's table." Miss Marple stepped forward silently. She didn't push. She didn't interrupt. She simply moved closer. Mrs. Dalton lifted the empty tray, turned it over, checked the underside. Nothing. Her hands tightened around the metal. "You don't understand," she whispered. "These muffins weren't just muffins." Miss Marple heard that. The pain behind it. Jeremy wiped his palms on his trousers. He looked at the floor, then at the table, then at the floor again. Ben pointed suddenly. "There's a small mark here." Everyone turned. A smear. Pale, greasy. Butter again. Mrs. Dalton's face went white. "That's mine. I use salted butter." No one else here does. Mrs. Trent frowned. That means whoever took them touched them. Jeremy stepped back again. His heel hit a chair leg. Miss Marple noted the flinch. The fear. The guilt. That wasn't fully guilt, just pressure. The Reverend tried to restore order. We will... Look carefully. Perhaps they were moved for judging. Miss Marple shook her head. Softly, barely noticeable. Mrs. Dalton snapped. No one would move 12 muffins by accident. Ben crouched again, looked under another table. No crumbs, no wrappers, nothing. The hall grew colder, still, heavy. Miss Marple finally spoke. "Check the cloth," she said quietly. Mrs. Dalton lifted the cloth, shook it gently. Nothing. Jeremy exhaled shakily, too shakily. "Mrs." Hartford took one slow step back, her tin still under her hand. Miss Marple watched everything. Everyone. Something valuable was gone. Not ruined, not misplaced. Removed. Taken with purpose. Taken fast. Taken quietly. The Reverend whispered, "Where could they have gone?" Miss Marple looked at the empty table, then at the butter smear, then at the nervous faces around her. She spoke softly, but every word carried weight. It wasn't lost. It was taken. The room held its breath. Not one person moved. Miss Marple stepped closer to the empty table. She touched nothing. She only looked. Her eyes scanned the cloth. Flat. Smooth. No wrinkles. No crumbs. 12 muffins, gone without a trace. She crouched slightly. Her hand hovered near the table leg. A faint scent reached her. Buttery. Sharp. Salted. Mrs. Dalton's signature ingredient. Miss Marple traced the air gently. The smell was fresh. Too fresh. Someone had touched those muffins a moment ago. Not earlier. Now. She followed the scent to the second clue. A thin streak. Barely visible. Grease. Smeared from left to right. A quick motion. A hurried motion. Mrs. Trent leaned over her shoulder. "What do you see?" she whispered. "Movement," Miss Marple replied softly. "Quick. Purposeful." Ben Hollow approached too. He knelt next to. "I saw that smear earlier," he said. "It wasn't spread like this." Miss Marple nodded. It changed shape. Someone stepped on it. Jeremy stood behind them, his breathing uneven, hands shaky. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Trembling is louder than footsteps. Miss Marple rose slowly. Her eyes went to the floor. A faint mark, half a crescent, left by a shoe, pressed lightly, not enough to hide, not enough to reveal. She followed it with her gaze. It led toward the back door. Not the main door, not the judging table, the back door, the least used one. Mrs. Dalton saw her looking. "What is it?" she asked. Someone moved quickly, Miss Marple said. Toward the kitchen. The Reverend stepped forward. "The kitchen?" Miss Marple nodded once. A small nod. Precise. Certain. The villagers followed her quietly. No chatter now. Just fear. Miss Marple pushed the kitchen door open. Gently. Slowly. Nothing dramatic waited inside. Just silence. Shelves. Pots. A kettle. A counter wiped too clean, but not clean enough. Miss Marple stopped at the counter's edge. A small crumble sat there. Round. Golden brown. Cranberry speck. Exact match to Mrs. Dalton's recipe. Mrs. Dalton gasped. "That's mine." Miss Marple touched the counter beside the crumble. Her finger slid over something invisible. Oily. Thin. Another trace of salted butter. 2 clues now. Connected. Not random. Behind her, Jeremy shifted. His shoe scraped the floor. His breath hitched slightly. Miss Marple turned her head a fraction. She didn't look at him directly. She just listened, trembling again. Sharper this time. Not guilt alone. Fear. The Reverend moved beside her. "So whoever took them came through here?" "Yes," Miss Marple said. "And they were in a hurry." Mrs. Trent glanced at Mrs. Hartford. "Why are you still holding that tin?" she asked. Mrs. Hartford didn't answer. She only tightened her grip. Too tight. Miss Marple stepped deeper into the kitchen. She checked the bin, the sink, the cabinet edges. No muffins, no wrappers, no stolen tray. But every clue pointed to hands that worked fast, hands that knew what they were looking for. Miss Marple walked back to the doorway. She looked at the smear, the crumble, the faint shoe mark, the nervous faces. This wasn't clumsy, she said, her voice calm, quiet, firm. This wasn't theft. This was a search. Miss Marple returned to the main hall. People had gathered in small, nervous clusters. Whispers moved faster than truth. She approached. Character A first. They stood near the corner table, arms crossed, jaw tight. "May I ask you something?" Miss Marple said. Character A nodded slowly. Too slowly. A measured nod, not a natural one. "You were near Mrs. Dalton's table earlier," Miss Marple said. "A few minutes before the muffins disappeared." Character A shifted. There. Foot tapped once, then stopped. "Only walked past," they said. "I didn't touch anything." A lie. Not a large one. A precise one. Just enough to create distance. Not enough to hide guilt. Miss Marple didn't react. She only tilted her head. "You didn't touch the tablecloth?" she asked. "No." Character A replied. Too fast. Too firm. Miss Marple waited. Silence always reveals more than questions. Character A swallowed. Looked at the door, then at the wall. Anywhere except Miss Marple's eyes. "You sure?" Miss Marple asked softly. Character A cleared their throat. "I might have brushed it, but that's all." A correction. The first crack. Miss Marple watched their hands, fingers rubbing against each other. Nervous. Uneven. "What were you looking for when you brushed it?" Miss Marple asked. "I wasn't looking for anything." Character A said, "But the table was crooked. I straightened it." Another lie. Small, polished, practiced. Miss Marple said nothing. She simply noted the shift. Voice slightly higher, breath slightly shorter. Behind them, Character B stood watching, trying not to watch, avoiding every glance that came their way. Miss Marple turned toward them. "You saw something," she said. A calm statement, not an accusation. Character B froze, hands clasped behind their back, eyes on the floor. "I didn't see much," they whispered. Miss Marple stepped closer. "One crumb can be enough." Character B hesitated, shoulders tense, feet angled away. A person ready to flee, not speak. Miss Marple waited again. Patience is sharper than any interrogation. Finally, Character B exhaled. "A few minutes before the muffins were found missing," they said. Someone reached across the table. Very quickly. Miss Marple didn't blink. "Who?" Character B swallowed. "I'm not sure. I saw movement. A sleeve, maybe. Dark color." Miss Marple tilted her head slightly. "A sleeve? Yes." A pause, and a hand, just for a moment. "What kind of motion?" Miss Marple asked. "A sweep." Character B replied, like someone grabbing something fast. Miss Marple absorbed the detail. A sweep motion matched the butter smear, matched the crumble in the kitchen, matched the hurried footprint. She turned back to Character A. Their eyes shifted away, to the window, to the Reverend, anywhere but the table they claimed to have only straightened. "You look uneasy," Miss Marple said quietly. Character A stiffened. "I just don't want to be blamed for something I didn't do." Miss Marple nodded. "I understand." But she didn't move away. She watched the tiny twitch in their jaw, the tremor in their hand, the way they stepped back half an inch. Not a full step, just enough to create distance. Distance meant fear. Fear meant truth waiting beneath it. And in that small retreat, Miss Marple saw it clearly. Secrets, plural, hidden in plain sight. Everyone had a secret, but only one mattered. The room felt unsteady, not loud, not chaotic, just tight, compressed, like everyone was holding one breath. Miss Marple watched the pressure build. It always did. Then someone cracked. This time, it was Character C. They stood near the wall, arms pressed tight to their sides, eyes darting from table to table, avoiding every glance. Miss Marple walked toward them slowly. No force, no threat, just quiet steps. Character C flinched as she approached, not dramatically, just enough to confirm what she already sensed. They were close to breaking. "Are you all right?" Miss Marple asked. Character C nodded. A lie. Too quick. Too stiff. Miss Marple waited. Silence always opened more doors than questions. Finally, the crack appeared. I didn't mean to get involved," Character C whispered. Their voice shook, not from guilt, from fear. Miss Marple didn't interrupt. Fear always revealed more when left room to breathe. "I saw something," Character C said. "Earlier, before everything went wrong." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "What did you see?" Character C swallowed. Their fingers twisted together. They leaned closer, as if afraid others would hear. "I saw someone near the table," they said. "Moving quickly. Too quickly." Miss Marple listened carefully. Tone, pacing, breath. Every signal mattered. "Who?" she asked. I don't know." Another lie. Smaller this time, but still a lie. Character C continued. "It happened so fast. A hand, a sleeve, dark fabric, and then the muffins were gone." Their voice cracked on the last word. Miss Marple studied their face, eyes avoiding hers. Shoulders tense, lips trembling slightly. They were telling the truth about seeing someone, but hiding something else, something bigger. "What frightened you?" Miss Marple asked softly. Character C looked at the floor. "The way they moved," they whispered. "It didn't look like someone stealing food. It looked like someone searching." Miss Marple felt the shift. The detail aligned perfectly with the clues. The smear, the crumble, the rushed footprint. Someone wasn't stealing to ruin the contest. Someone was hunting for something. Miss Marple leaned slightly closer. "What else did you see?" she asked. Character C froze. Their entire posture locked. Miss Marple waited. Character C opened their mouth, closed it, tried again. "I can't say," they whispered finally. Their voice dropped low, barely audible. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "What stops you?" "I shouldn't have been looking," Character C said. "If I say more, someone will be angry." There it was, the fear behind the fear. Not of being blamed, but of someone else, someone close, someone watching. Miss Marple scanned the room. 2 people turned away too fast. 2 others stiffened. 1 took a small step back. Pressure worked like light. It revealed shadows. Character C wiped their palms on their sleeves. "I'm sorry," they said. "That's all I can say. It wasn't." Miss Marple knew it. Everyone knew it. But the truth they held wasn't ready to surface yet. The harmless part had risen. The useful part was buried, and the dangerous part still waited beneath their fear. Half the truth surfaced. The dangerous half stayed below. The hall settled into a nervous silence, not calm, just quiet enough for thoughts to grow heavy. Miss Marple stepped back from Character C. They had given enough hints, not answers, hints. She turned toward the center of the room, toward Mrs. Dalton. Her posture had changed, rigid, guarded, hands locked together too tightly. Miss Marple approached her. "May I ask something?" she said softly. Mrs. Dalton didn't look up. "You want to ask about the muffins?" "No," Miss Marple replied. "I want to ask about their history." Mrs. Dalton froze. Jeremy looked away quickly. Too quickly. Miss Marple lowered her voice. "These weren't ordinary muffins. They meant something." Mrs. Dalton inhaled sharply. A small sound, almost a sting. She finally spoke. "My sister created the recipe," she said, before she passed. Miss Marple nodded once, a quiet gesture, understanding without pity. Mrs. Dalton continued. She taught me how to make them when we were young. She always said I used too much zest, but she loved them anyway. Her voice softened for a moment, then hardened again. Jeremy shifted behind her. Miss Marple noticed. Mrs. Dalton looked straight ahead. My sister was the better baker, she said. She always won the contests. Every year. Miss Marple listened carefully. Tone mattered more than words. She could make anything, Mrs. Dalton whispered. Tarts. Scones. Every dessert had her touch. Jeremy's jaw tightened. Miss Marple let the silence settle. It pushed the truth upward. My sister and I fought, Mrs. Dalton said. Before she died. Over something small, yet it felt large at the time. Siblings? Miss Marple said quietly. Mrs. Dalton nodded. Yes, always competing. Always comparing. She paused. She won that last year too, the year before she passed. Miss Marple moved slightly closer. What was the fight about? Ownership, Mrs. Dalton said. The recipe. She said it was hers. I said it was ours. Miss Marple understood the ache behind every word. It was the last day we spoke, Mrs. Dalton added. Jeremy's breathing changed. Shallow. Uneven. Miss Marple turned toward him gently. And you learned the recipe too, Jeremy? He nodded, but his eyes stayed down. From her? Miss Marple asked. Another nod. Slower this time, filled with something heavy. Mrs. Trent stepped closer. So this is about family pride? She asked. Miss Marple shook her head. No, it's older than pride. Mrs. Dalton looked away. We never resolved it, she whispered. She died before we could. Jeremy finally spoke. She left the recipe to both of us, he said. But the note disappeared. Miss Marple felt the shift again. A new detail, small, but important. A missing note? She asked. Jeremy nodded. It was written on a torn card. A message from her, half missing, half unreadable. Mrs. Dalton stiffened. That card was private. Jeremy swallowed. It meant something. Miss Marple understood now. The muffins weren't the target. The recipe wasn't the target. The meaning behind them was. Someone wanted more than a win. Someone wanted a piece of the past. Pain, memory, regret, all tied to one missing object. It wasn't about dessert. It wasn't about competition. It was about the wound that never closed. This wasn't about the object. This was about an old wound. The hall felt crowded now. Too many eyes. Too much fear. Too many secrets shared in half words. Miss Marple needed distance. Quiet. A clearer angle. She moved toward the side door. No one followed. Most stayed frozen in the same tight circles. Miss Marple stepped outside. Cold air. Stillness. A different kind of silence. Useful silence. She looked at the ground first. Details lived there. A faint mark near the step. Not dirt. Not dust. A heel impression. Pressed lightly. Not from a heavy shoe. Someone left in a hurry. Someone light on their feet. Miss Marple crouched carefully. The mark curved slightly at the edge. A familiar shape. Not from Mrs. Dalton. Not from Jeremy. But from someone else. She followed the faint trail. 3 steps. Then a 4th. Then it faded. Rushed footsteps never stayed long. Next, she checked the wall. Nothing. Then the doorframe. A small scrape. Thin. Shallow. Left by. Someone turning too quickly. She scanned the ground again. Something caught the light. A scrap. Small. White. Wrinkled. Miss Marple picked it up gently. A torn piece of paper. Smooth on one edge. Ripped on the other. A corner of a card. Handwriting faint, but visible. Not a full word. Just part of one. Enough to tell it was from something personal. She turned it over. A tiny smudge. Dark ink. Pressed hard by someone gripping it too tightly. She slipped it into her glove. Then she saw the second clue. Near the hedgerow. Half hidden. Miss Marple walked closer. A small scrap of cloth. Thin, dark fabric, torn at one corner. She lifted it. The size matched a sleeve someone had mentioned earlier, a dark one. In a quick motion, over the table, she straightened. This wasn't windblown, this wasn't dropped carelessly. Someone tore it in motion. A quick pull, a hard turn. Fabric caught on the doorframe. She felt the tension in the fibers. Not an old tear, a fresh one. She turned back toward the hall. Through the window she saw Character B, standing alone, arms folded, head lowered, shoulders tight, their coat, dark fabric. Matching the scrap in her hand, Miss Marple stepped quietly toward the door. She didn't enter yet. She simply watched through the glass. Character B looked up suddenly. Their eyes moved across the room, scanning, measuring, avoiding everyone. Then they touched their sleeve. Their fingers brushed the edge, searching, not for comfort, for something missing. Miss Marple saw the panic rise. Character B checked again, faster this time, then stopped. Hand froze on the fabric, exactly where the tear should be. Miss Marple slid the scrap deeper into her glove. The footprint, the torn card, the ripped cloth. 3 clues, all pointing the same way, all pointing to the same person. But motive still waited in the dark. She stepped inside slowly, eyes watching her, breath held. She looked directly at Character B. Their face tightened, their sleeve trembled. Something inside them shook harder than the fabric. Miss Marple spoke softly. They tore it on purpose. But why? Miss Marple stood near the center of the hall, not moving, not speaking, just thinking. She closed her eyes for a moment, mapped the room in her mind. Every table, every door, every face. Then she walked to Mrs. Dalton's empty table. Slow steps, precise steps. This is where it began, she murmured. She pointed to the cloth. Still smooth, still untouched. Someone reached across from the left, she said. She moved 1 step to the left, stopped, bent slightly. They didn't pull the tray, she said quietly. They lifted the muffins by hand. Mrs. Trent stared. How do you know that? Miss Marple traced the air. The cloth didn't shift. The tray didn't slide. Only the food moved. She stepped back, then turned toward the back door. Their next step was here. She walked straight to the faint butter smear, the one near the table leg. They moved fast, she said. Faster than someone stealing to hide. Faster than someone trying to sabotage. The Reverend frowned. Then what were they doing? Miss Marple didn't answer yet. She followed the imaginary line across the floor. 3 steps. 4. Exactly where she had seen the footprint outside. She paused at the door frame, placed her fingers lightly on the narrow scrape. They turned too quickly, she said. Caught their sleeve, tore it. Character B shifted beside the wall. Quiet movement, but not quiet enough, Miss Marple noticed. She pushed the door open gently, walked halfway through, then stopped. This is where they hesitated, she said. The others gathered behind her. Why would they hesitate? Mrs. Trent asked. Miss Marple stepped aside, pointed to the narrow gap between door and wall. They were listening, she said, for footsteps, or voices, or danger. She continued forward. She reached the kitchen threshold, stopped again. This is where they made the choice, she whispered. She touched the edge of the counter, found the faint butter trace again. They placed something here, she said, but only for a moment. A short pause, a shift in grip. Mrs. Dalton's breath caught. You mean they examined them? Yes, Miss Marple said. She lifted her hand, mimicking the motion. They lifted, turned, checked each piece, not for taste, not for quality. Jeremy swallowed hard. So what were they checking for? Miss Marple looked at him gently. You know, she said softly. His shoulders tensed. She walked to the bin, the sink, the cupboard, then back to the door. No crumbs, she said. No wrappers, no discarded paper. No sign of tasting or testing. She returned to the hall. They didn't eat them. They didn't hide them. They didn't throw them away. Ben frowned. Then why take them? Miss Marple finally faced everyone. Because they were looking, she said. Not stealing. She tapped the torn scrap of card inside her glove, hidden from sight, a missing piece of a bigger truth. They moved with intent, she said. Every step, every turn, every hesitation. Jeremy wiped his palms again. They were searching for the recipe note, weren't they? Miss Marple didn't answer. Not yet. She looked around the hall, at the eyes avoiding hers, at the guilt hiding in silence, at the fear tucked inside every shaky breath. Someone here had moved fast, with purpose, with desperation, and with something heavier than guilt. Someone moved with purpose and fear. The hall was too crowded now. Too many eyes watching each other, too much pressure building without answers. Miss Marple needed distance, a quieter place, a clearer memory. She turned to Companion. Come with me. A moment, she said. Companion nodded. No questions, just quiet understanding. They left through the side door, walked down the short lane, stopped at a small cottage with peeling paint. Miss Marple knocked once. A soft sound, but enough. The door opened slowly. Mrs. Brill, the cottage owner, peered out, surprised, alert, a little uneasy. Miss Marple, she said, you're out early from the hall. I needed a word, Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Brill stepped aside. Come in then. The cottage smelled of tea and books. Not strong, just familiar. Miss Marple sat in the chair closest to the stove. Companion remained near the door. Mrs. Brill folded her hands. Is this about the contest? She asked. Miss Marple nodded. It is. Mrs. Brill sighed. I knew that recipe would bring trouble again. Companion leaned forward. You knew? Mrs. Brill nodded again. Her eyes dimmed slightly, old memory rising. That recipe belonged to two sisters, she said. Everyone knows that part. She paused. But few know the rest. Miss Marple waited. Silence encouraged the truth. Mrs. Brill continued. They shared everything once. The shop, the kitchen, their dreams. Another pause. Until the argument. Miss Marple spoke softly. The argument about the recipe. Yes. Mrs. Brill tightened her grip on her apron. They both wanted the credit. They both felt wronged, and neither apologized. Companion frowned. Over muffins? Mrs. Brill shook her head. No, over what the muffins represented. She looked directly at Miss Marple. It was the last thing they created together. Miss Marple nodded. I understand. Mrs. Brill's voice softened. There was a note, too, written by the younger sister before she fell ill. A message, private, meant for both of them. Miss Marple leaned in slightly. A torn card? Mrs. Brill looked surprised. You found a piece? Miss Marple didn't answer. Not yet. Mrs. Brill continued anyway. That note was meant to heal things. But it vanished. No one ever found it. Some said one sister hid it to protect herself. Some said the other tore it up in anger. She shook her head. No one really knew. Miss Marple watched her carefully. Did you see it? Even once? Mrs. Brill hesitated, then nodded. Only once, she whispered. It said something about forgiveness. Half a sentence, half a promise, half a truth. Companion glanced at Miss Marple. You think someone is still looking for that note? Mrs. Brill answered before Miss Marple could. They never stopped, she said. Not really. Miss Marple finally spoke. The muffins were taken to find it. Mrs. Brill closed her eyes for a moment. That recipe carried pain, but that note carried the cure. Miss Marple stood. Our thief wasn't hungry. They were desperate. Mrs. Brill nodded. Again. Someone tried to erase the past, she whispered. But the past fought back. Miss Marple glanced at the door. Time to return. Secrets waited in the hall, and the truth was no longer quiet. Someone tried to erase the past, but the past fought back. Miss Marple returned to the hall. The noise had died down. Only tension remained. She moved to a quiet corner. away from the crowd, away from nervous eyes. Companion stood guard near the doorway, silent, alert. Miss Marple removed her glove, slowly, carefully. The small torn scrap rested inside. She placed it on the table, flat, smooth, undisturbed. A corner of a card, handwriting faded, but present. Ink pressed down with emotion. Not light, not casual, purposeful. She leaned in. No one else dared to come close. The handwriting slanted slightly, rightward. Soft pressure near the start of each letter, stronger pressure at the end. She whispered, "Not Mrs. Dalton." Companion stepped closer. "How can you tell?" Miss Marple tapped the ink. Mrs. Dalton writes with a sharp lift. This hand falls at the end. She lifted the scrap by the edges. The back held a faint scent, warm, almost sweet. But not from baking. It smelled like old heat, paper held near a flame once. Not burned, just kissed by warmth. Miss Marple inhaled again. Yes, a faint smoke memory. Something heated, something hidden. She ran her fingers gently across the corner. The texture shifted halfway. Soft, then stiff. "Water," she murmured. "Just a drop." Someone tried to erase the ink. Companion frowned. "Why only part of it?" Miss Marple lowered the scrap. "Because they didn't want to destroy it, only weaken it. Blur something before someone else read it." She flattened the scrap again. The fragment held 3 letters. Half a word, half a sentence. Not enough to reveal meaning, but enough to prove intention. She picked up the scrap, turned it under the lamp. A faint crease ran through the center. Not from age, from folding. Someone folded this card many times, opened it many times, argued with it silently. Companion whispered, "Do you think the rest still exists?" Miss Marple nodded. It must. The thief looked for it. She placed the scrap down again. Her eyes drifted to the edges. One edge smooth, one torn, one scorched slightly, one dampened. "Heat on one side," she said. "Water on another." Someone tried 2 methods. Neither worked. Companion swallowed. "So the thief panicked?" Miss Marple nodded once. "A desperate person will try everything except the right thing, tearing it completely." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a thread of dark fabric, the sleeve scrap. It matched the torn corner perfectly in size. She placed it beside the card, close, but not touching. "Someone tore their sleeve trying to reach this," she said. Her voice remained steady, firm, focused. She turned the scrap again, looked at the ink under a different angle. A shadow appeared, a faint mark, not a letter, a stroke, a part of something emotional, written with weight. Someone wrote this with regret. Someone hid this with fear. Miss Marple exhaled. This piece meant more than the recipe, more than the contest, more than the rivalry. This piece carried the apology one sister never delivered, and someone wanted to keep that apology buried. She held the scrap between 2 fingers, examined the rip, the missing half, the truth lost in someone's pocket. Someone tore it. Someone kept the rest. Someone still hid it. She placed the scrap down slowly. They kept one corner, and that corner is the key. Miss Marple stayed in the corner of the hall, quiet, still, thinking. Everyone else moved in small, tense circles, whispers, glances. More fear than conversation. She looked at the torn scrap again. One corner, one half word, one emotional truth. Then she looked at the villagers. Jealousy stood near the tables. Guilt stood by the window. Memory hovered around the kitchen door. Protection leaned against the wall. Loyalty trembled at the center of the room. Every motive was present. Every motive watched her. Miss Marple began connecting them. First, jealousy. Mrs. Trent had carried it for years. Always second place. Always compared. Always losing to Mrs. Dalton or her sister. But jealousy alone didn't move this fast. Second, guilt. Jeremy carried that one, clear in his hands, clear in his breathing, clear in every glance he avoided. But guilt wasn't enough to launch a frantic search. Third, memory. Mrs. Dalton held it tightly. Her sister's legacy. The final recipe, the final message, the final argument. Memory shaped her actions, but memory didn't hide crumbs. Fourth, protection. Miss Marple's eyes moved to the far corner. Character B. Silent, still, sleeve torn, breathing uneven. Protection lived. In their stance. Not sabotage, not mischief. Protection of someone else, someone close. Fifth, loyalty. Always the quietest motive, always the most dangerous. Loyalty moved in shadows. Loyalty hid things. Loyalty tore sleeves in haste. Loyalty carried old pain without speaking. Miss Marple folded her hands. All 5 motives, she whispered. Companion. Stepped closer. 5? They asked. She nodded. Jealousy pushed the tension. Guilt pushed the nerves. Memory pushed the grief. Protection pushed the actions. Loyalty pushed the desperation. Companion frowned. And which one stole the muffins? Miss Marple shook her head. That's the wrong question. Companion blinked. Then what's the right one? Who feared the truth in the note? Miss Marple said. That changed everything. She looked at Mrs. Dalton, pained, but steady. She looked at Jeremy, shaken, but honest in his fear. She looked at Mrs. Trent, envious, but not desperate. She looked at Ben Hollow, embarrassed, but harmless. Then she looked at Character B, again. Their hands hovered near their sleeve, protective, not of themselves, but of something they feared losing. Miss Marple took one slow step forward, her voice steady, soft, certain. The person who took the muffins didn't want to destroy the recipe, she said. They wanted to destroy the message attached to it. The room tensed again. Mrs. Dalton whispered, "The apology." Miss Marple nodded. Yes, the missing apology. The message meant for 2 sisters. A message that could change how one of you remembers her. Jeremy's breath hitched. I knew it, he said. She wrote something important, something about forgiveness. Miss Marple studied him, then studied the fear behind him, the fear watching her, the fear clinging to silence. This wasn't anger, Miss Marple said softly. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't competition. She looked directly at Character B. It was someone trying to protect a person they love, from a truth that might hurt them more. The room fell silent. One secret, one motive, one heart breaking quietly behind all the noise. Miss Marple exhaled. It wasn't hate, she said. It was wounded love. It wasn't hate. It was wounded love. The room held its breath. No one moved. No one blinked. Every eye drifted toward Character B. But Miss Marple didn't speak to them first. She turned to Jeremy. He flinched. His shoulders tightened. His hands curled in weak fists. Jeremy, Miss Marple said, come here. He stepped forward, slow, unsteady, barely breathing. She lowered her voice. You know more than you said. Jeremy swallowed hard. Yes, he whispered. I do. Mrs. Dalton gasped softly. Jeremy? He didn't face her. He kept his eyes on the floor. Miss Marple waited. Silence pushed him forward. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Jeremy said. His voice cracked once. Then again, he steadied it with effort. I didn't want anyone hurt. Mrs. Trent crossed her arms. Then why steal the muffins? Jeremy shook his head quickly. I didn't steal them. I only helped hide something. Miss Marple nodded. Of course. Jeremy frowned. You? Knew? Yes, she said. You don't move like a thief. You move like someone trying to shield someone else. Jeremy's breath caught. His eyes glistened. Mrs. Dalton reached out. Jeremy, from me. He pulled back, then shook his head. No, not from you. From someone who would break if they saw that note. Miss Marple studied him. Who? Jeremy hesitated. Pain shifted inside him. You could see it in the tightness of his jaw. in the tremble of his hands. "Someone who loved your sister," Jeremy whispered. Mrs. Dalton froze. Miss Marple stepped closer. Loved her or feared her memory? Jeremy shut his eyes. Both. The room fell quiet again. Thick, heavy. Jeremy finally looked up, toward the corner, toward character B. "They didn't mean to hide the truth," Jeremy said. "They only wanted to soften it, so it wouldn't hurt anyone." Character B pressed their back against the wall. Their face went pale. Miss Marple spoke gently. "You're protecting them." Jeremy nodded. "I had to. They asked me to distract everyone. I didn't think it would go this far. I only moved the tray. I didn't take anything." Mrs. Trent stepped closer. "So, you knew about the torn note?" Jeremy nodded again. "Yes, I saw it once. Only once. Before it disappeared again." Miss Marple asked, "And why hide it?" Jeremy wiped his palms. "I didn't hide it. They did." He looked at character B again. "They thought the message would reopen every wound in this village. They thought it would bring back all the anger, all the rivalry, all the pain." Character B flinched. Jeremy's voice broke. "I promised I'd help. I promised I wouldn't tell. I promised because they cried. I've never seen them cry like that." Mrs. Dalton whispered. "Jeremy, who were you trying to protect?" He turned fully now, toward character B. "Not myself," Jeremy said, his voice small, raw, honest. "I was protecting them, because they couldn't protect themselves from the truth." Miss Marple stepped between them, soft, steady, certain. Jeremy lowered his head. "He confessed," Miss Marple whispered. Then she looked at character B. "But not for himself." He confessed, but not for himself. Miss Marple walked back into the hall. Slow steps, measured, calm on the surface, sharp underneath. The villagers sensed the shift immediately. Chatter stopped. Hands froze. Breaths tightened. She stood near the long table, not at the center, not above anyone, just present enough to draw every eye. "Please gather," Miss Marple said. Her voice was soft, but firm. Enough to bring everyone closer. Mrs. Dalton moved first. Jeremy followed reluctantly. Mrs. Trent hovered near the back. Ben stayed near the window, and character B stayed near the wall. Arms crossed, shoulders tense. Miss Marple waited until the semicircle formed. No one spoke. No one dared. She folded her hands. "The note," she began. "The torn piece. The one someone tried to hide." A ripple passed through the group. Mrs. Trent raised a hand slightly. "You found more?" Miss Marple shook her head. "I found enough." Jeremy lowered his gaze again. Miss Marple looked at him gently. "You gave one truth. Now we need the rest." Jeremy swallowed. "I said what I could." "And now," Miss Marple said, "someone else must speak." All heads turned, except one. Character B kept their eyes locked on the floor, not blinking, not moving. Miss Marple faced them. "You were near the door," she said. "You hesitated when you left." She paused. "You searched for something you believed could hurt someone you love." Character B flinched visibly. "Mrs." Dalton gasped again. "Is that true?" Character B didn't answer. Miss Marple continued. "You tore your sleeve in your hurry. You left the first clue outside. You left the second clue in the kitchen." Mrs. Trent whispered. "Why hide any of it?" Miss Marple turned to her. "Because the past still hurts. Because the message on that card wasn't simple. Because someone feared that a painful truth would reopen everything we just settled." Jeremy stepped forward suddenly. "It wasn't their fault," he said quickly. "I pushed them. I said the note would ruin the contest, ruin the family memory, ruin everything." Miss Marple raised a hand. Jeremy fell quiet. "This isn't about blame," Miss Marple said. "This is about motive. A motive shaped by fear, loyalty, and love." Mrs. Dalton's voice shook. "Love for who?" Miss Marple faced her gently. "Love for your sister, and love for you." Mrs. Dalton pressed a hand to her mouth. Miss Marple turned again to character B. "You saw the torn card first," she said. You read enough to understand what it meant. You knew the message was unfinished, and you knew it carried guilt none of us had heard before. Character B shook their head slowly. I didn't want anyone to see it, they whispered. I didn't want the apology to hurt her. I didn't want her to think her sister regretted everything. Mrs. Dalton staggered. My sister apologized? Character B squeezed their hands. Tight, shaking, barely holding. Jeremy whispered. They were terrified you'd see it and break. Character B finally looked up, eyes wet, voice thin. She loved you, they whispered. She didn't want that argument to be her legacy. I didn't. I want you to blame yourself. I didn't want you to read the words and fall apart. The hall went silent, heavy. Still, Miss Marple stepped closer. Everyone waited for the truth, she said softly. Only one feared the next words. Everyone waited. Only one feared the next words. Miss Marple faced the circle, calm, certain. Every clue rested in her mind. The muffins were not the goal, she said. The recipe was not the goal. Someone searched for the torn note, the message written by the younger sister. The message meant for both. Eyes narrowed, breaths tightened. Miss Marple pointed to the door. The sleeve tore there. The footprint led outside. The butter smear marked the pause. The scrap shows heat. The edge shows water. Someone tried to blur the truth. She turned slowly toward Character B. You feared the apology, she said. You feared Mrs. Dalton would read it and break. You feared guilt would crush her. So you searched for the missing half. You tried to hide it. You moved fast. Too fast. Mrs. Dalton stepped forward. Why hide it from me? Character B broke. Hands shaking, voice trembling. I couldn't let you think she regretted loving you, they said. I couldn't let that pain return. I only wanted to protect you. I only wanted the past to stay gentle. Mrs. Dalton covered her mouth. Tears rose quietly. Miss Marple nodded. Soft. Kind. The truth wasn't criminal. Just heartbreak. The hall softened. Voices lowered. Breaths eased. Mrs. Dalton stepped toward Character B. Slow. Gentle. No anger left. You should have told me, she whispered. I would have understood. Character B shook. I was afraid, they said. I didn't want you hurt again. Mrs. Dalton touched their hand. A simple gesture. Warm. Steady. You protected me, she said. But you carried the pain alone. You shouldn't have. Jeremy wiped his eyes. He stepped closer. I only wanted peace, he said softly. Miss Marple nodded. Peace begins with truth, she replied. Mrs. Dalton exhaled. Long, tired, relieved. Then let it breathe, she said. The villagers relaxed. Tension melted. Whispers softened into comfort. Miss Marple watched quietly. A small smile. A quiet victory. Some stories ended with blame. This one ended with release. Some wounds heal when truth finally breathes. A single teacup sat on the table, steam fading, quiet, still. Beside it lay the folded letter, edges worn, ink softened by time. A small truth preserved at last. The window light shifted gently across the room, slow, unhurried, a sign that the day had settled. A pocket watch rested near the cup, its ticking steady, its rhythm calm. No rush left in the gears. Miss Marple closed the door behind her. The cottage exhaled. The village steadied. Peace returned. Not complete. Just enough. The village rests. Almost. Thank you for listening tonight. I hope you enjoyed this quiet mystery. Tell me, which clue stood out to you first? And where are you listening from right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. I always enjoy reading them. Join us again tomorrow. Another quiet village waits. Another quiet secret follows. And as always, tomorrow, another kettle will boil.